So I would like to welcome our audience to episode 5, season 1 of the Wide Open podcast. My name is Bruce Huberman, and my co-host is Paul Asiante. Our executive producer and sound engineer is James Pavelko. It gives me a significant amount of pleasure to introduce our guest today, Danny Meyer. Without even doing any research, you realize that his name is ubiquitous with food and hospitality. As a 27-year-old, he founded the famed Union Square Café, and his career has since skyrocketed to a new area code. A graduate of Trinity College and a friend of my co-host, we couldn't be more excited to have you on the podcast, Danny. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to carve out, no pun intended, some time for us. So let's get started. Paul, it's your pulpit.
Great. Well, Danny, the whole genesis of this idea of wide open is my belief that highly successful people have very similar qualities, traits, work ethic, those sorts of things, being people attached. And so we embarked on a journey to try to talk to people that we felt were highly successful in their space. And since your name came across my desk 30 years ago at Trinity College, it's been incredible to watch and the adoration that you receive, not only, of course, at Trinity, but everywhere. And so my first question for you is, you opened your first restaurant at 27, and people are motivated by different forces. My motivation has always been fear of failure. And I have always had the imposter syndrome, and it keeps me up at night. So you must have had a heck of a lot of sleepless nights at 27 years old opening up a restaurant like that. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, your description describes me. Interestingly, I didn't have a lot of sleepless nights before opening the restaurant, but I had a very, very healthy dose of imposter syndrome, which I still have. and I feel like I had a real need to prove something to myself. And I've seen with a lot of the people I've hired, a lot of the teams I've put together, the ones that really succeed seem to be the ones where the people with the most juice, the chef, the general manager, the wine director, service director, but the pastry chef, are at a point in their lives, and for some of us that goes on forever, but they're especially at a point in their lives where they feel like they have something to prove to somebody. Could be to themselves, it could be to their late grandparent, or whatever. But it's that little chip, and I definitely had that growing up in St. Louis. I am the middle of 3. My older sister is not quite 2 years older than I am. She was, an avid reader, an amazing student, straight A's, went to Harvard. And I transferred from an all-boys school to her school, which was co-ed, in 10th grade, which is a horrible time to transfer. You're trying to figure out who you are. You got sports, in my case, interested in girls, and interested in almost anything other than studying at that point. And I'll just never forget, I'd go to class, same teacher that taught my sister 2 years before me, and at least 2 of them asked me why I couldn't be as smart as my sister. And I just backed up. I just said, then I'm just not even going to try. And long story short, by the time it came time, and by the way, I was kind of towards the top of my class at the all-boys school through 9th grade. So it's not that I was stupid, but I had no interest in studying or at really succeeding at anything. I wanted to be in with my classmates. It's much more socially successful than I was academically successful. So anyway, it came time to apply to colleges. And like an idiot, I only applied to 3 schools. I applied to Princeton, where my dad and his father had gone. I applied to Brown, which for some reason I thought was a cool place to apply. I have no idea why. And I applied to Trinity, which I'd never even heard of, except that my dad at the time was foolishly trying to open 2 hotels in Rome at the exact time that Trinity was starting to launch its campus in Rome. And he had the same lawyer that Trinity had. And so my dad said, you need to have a backup school. So you should apply to Trinity, because I just met the lawyer of Trinity. Seems like a great guy. So I applied to Trinity. That was my third. No one applies to only 3 schools. That's what I did. I was rejected from Princeton, rejected from Brown, and waitlisted at Trinity. And
I know there's a great story about you writing that letter to,
well, yeah, I wrote. What happened, Bruce, is so my mom's father, my grandfather on my mom's side, at that time was on the board of directors of University of Chicago. And he hears from my mom about how I was in nowhere. And he said, it's very simple. I'm going to get him into University of Chicago. And I said, I'm not doing that because that's not right. And it wasn't me. And I'm going to earn this thing. So I did write the best letter I've ever written in my life to Trinity. I got down on my hands and knees and begged. And obviously I got off the wait list. And you want to talk about having something to prove? I was mad. I was mad at myself. I wasn't mad at anyone except myself, because I knew I was the one that screwed up my own opportunity here. And I got to Trinity freshman year, immediately got straight A's because I needed to prove that I wasn't stupid. And I wanted Trinity to see that, they should have just taken me in the first place. And there was something that just got unlocked in me at that point, where with almost every single thing I did, I had that God damn it, don't take me for granted. I'm gonna show you what I can do. And that followed me. So when I graduated Trinity, I worked in a political campaign in Chicago. Then I moved to New York and I took a sales job just because I wanted to live in New York, and it's the only job I could get. And I got lucky and became the New York salesperson, New York territory. I took a job which was, what the heck was it? $150? No, it was $16,000 a year. And I worked my butt off, and it turned out I got lucky because the New York salesperson quit, went to the competition. And I had to prove to these guys that as a 23-year-old, I could actually do this. I became top salesman in the company for 3 straight years because I had something to prove. And long story short, by the time I'm 27 and it was time to do my real passion, which I was fortunate to learn was the restaurant business, I had something to prove. I had something to prove to myself. And then for years, the biggest thing I had to prove to my parents, because why didn't you take your Trinity poli-sci degree and go be a lawyer like you're supposed to do? I had to prove to them that hospitality was actually a valid career choice. And they didn't have to be ashamed that I was just being in the restaurant business. But a lot of that motivated me to say, and I'm going to show you by actually doing well at this career. So that's all. But I wasn't losing sleep over opening a restaurant because I didn't know where it was going to go, and I didn't know what I didn't know. And if I had failed, it just wouldn't have really mattered because no one would have heard of me anyway. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs actually are incapable of seeing what could go wrong. You just have this itch that has to be scratched.
Well, it sounds like you had this passion even earlier on, and I thought that was sort of interesting. And you went to summer camp, and they had a cooking sort of competition that you were in, and I mean, you had that desire in terms of the industry. It seems like really early on. I mean, it was just sort of innate within you.
I did have that, and I spent a lot of my childhood either playing sports after school or often cooking with my dad. But I'd never ever thought of it as a career opportunity. That just wasn't something that ever crossed my mind. But I was getting a good education in food and cooking because my dad was in the travel business, and we had young French people living in our home, and we cooked all the time, and we got to travel quite a bit. And then, of course, I did go to Trinity's Rome campus junior year. Completely fell in love with Italy, and spent more of my time in Italian restaurants or Roman restaurants sometimes than I was spending in the classroom. I still did well. I didn't go back. I didn't regress to being a bad student, but I just feel so lucky to be able to do something that I love that can actually use my gifts. And, going back to what Coach Paul said earlier, I've always felt this desire to prove something. And, our business, just like so many other businesses, has rankings. Maybe not the same as you find on the squash court, but we had the Zagat survey for years and years and years and I would track where were we when they ranked food, decor, service, New York's favorite restaurants. And I'd get out my charts and figure out what we had to do to get to the next level. And it just has always mattered to me. And of course, while I've been talking about my need to prove something, the fun of this whole thing is in leadership is collecting people and giving them the tools they need so they can shine, and then shining the light on them as much as possible as we go up.
So, Danny, that's one of the things that I have felt from the beginning was a kindredness to you in that you're people attached and you put people first. And when I speak at a convention or a company retreat, the CEO will get up and say, well, these were our fourth quarter earnings and these were our goals for first quarter. And I get up and I say, I don't really believe in any of that. I believe if you take care of your people, the scoreboard takes care of itself. And I think that seems to be, in what I've seen and experienced with you and read, that seems to be your underlying driving force is the people. And could you touch on that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, it's we call it enlightened hospitality, but it's truly enlightened self-interest. You and I can't. Last time I checked, you weren't the guy playing all the matches, and I'm not the guy. Thankfully for our patrons, I'm not the guy cooking all the food. I'm not the guy opening all the wine bottles, making all the cocktails. So we rely on the degree to which we recruit people who have the God-given capability to be great, who also happen to be highly athletic. And in my business, someone who's athletic is someone who, in addition to what skills they have this other fabric that they are just going to find a way to win. And it matters to them to win. And I love to surround myself with those kind of people, teach them what can be taught, benefit from their own innate desire to win. And it's just fun. It's really, really fun. And we don't win. We don't have nearly the winning streak you had. We've had some good streaks, but we also have ups and downs. It's a people organization. We've got restaurants all over the place. Wherever I am, I'm not in a whole lot of restaurants. I'm not the guy at every touch point greeting you when you walk in the restaurant, making sure you feel seen and welcome and belong, right? I got to rely on the degree to which we pick the right people, train them the right way, and then took care of them so that they are actually motivated to want to win. And this kind of goes for when we call it enlightened hospitality, we're basically talking in our business about a virtuous cycle where we take our 5 stakeholders. We have the same stakeholders every organization has. People who work here, people who are our customers, community in which we do business, our suppliers, the people we rely on for all of our products, and our investors, the people who bet on us in the hopes that they would get a return on their investment. And by creating a virtuous cycle where one good thing keeps leading to something even better, I learned a long time ago, intuitively, but now very, very explicitly and intentionally, that we want the input. If the goal is for one good thing to keep leading to something even better, we learn that the best input are our people, that we will never, ever do any better with our guests or our investors. We'll never do any better than it feels to come to work here. On the other hand, if it feels great to come to work here and people feel like the people who work here feel like they have something they can belong to, we gave them a team, we gave them a tribe that they have something in common with philosophically. There's mutual respect and trust like you find on any great team. The odds of doing amazing things for our guests goes way, way up. And then the more revenue we have, assuming you've also got people who are good at running businesses, the more money we have for our investors. And guess what? The best way to take care of your people ultimately is to give them raises and promotions. And that only happens when you're making money. So the biggest thing I think we've learned through the years is that while it actually, in the same way as Coach just got done saying that take care of your people and the wins take care of themselves, it took me a lot of years. In fact, some of my people even criticized me for this, to even focus on profitability, because it just wasn't the thing that motivated me when I got into business. How many smiles can we create of people leaving, both those who work for us and those who dine with us? That was my scorecard. I have learned, and I feel very, very proud of this, that I don't go to work primarily for the purpose of making money. But I've also learned that if my destination is not making money and my destination is how much hospitality can we create for people, that car is going to run out of fuel if we don't make money. So profitability is the fuel without which we cannot get to the destination we want. And if you break that virtuous cycle anywhere, including especially profitability, you don't get to do any of the things you said you wanted to do. So it's taken me a number of years to really understand that. And I would say that, when Shake Shack went public, which was not my idea, it was not my idea to open a second Shake Shack. I was happy with one. But it's really about listening to my team. But when Shake Shack went public exactly 9 years ago in 2015, what I saw happen for people in terms of changing their livelihoods in ways I never could have done on my own, people retiring college debt, people paying their mortgage back, people being able to buy a car for the first time in their lives, because everyone on our team was given the opportunity to purchase stock at the strike price, and every manager in the company was given stock options. So when I saw what wealth creation can do for people who otherwise never would have been able to do that, I started getting religion that making money is a good thing, and especially if you can make money for other people.
So I have a question for you. How did that 51%, rule that I read about apply to the growth and all your different endeavors? Because it seems to really illuminate as the light bulb, analogy you used. So could you discuss that a little bit?
Sure. I always thought that if someone could tell me what success looked like really clearly, chances would be better I could achieve it. And I feel like I owe that same gift to people who work for us. And so the 51% is 51% of 100%. We want to get a 100% employee when we recruit. And just as I'm sure they want to get a 100% employer. And obviously that's an ideal. I wanted to get straight A's. I don't know that I did that more than probably 2 or 3 times in my life. And even when I did, there was probably 1 A- thrown in there. So it's not about perfection, but in order to get 100, we have this recipe. And the great thing is there's only 2 ingredients. It's 51 parts hospitality, how you make people feel, and 49 parts technical proficiency. How good are you at the thing that you're paid to do? Right? So we could get the world's best cook, but if they're also not that the most points we'd get for perfect pasta would be 49. That leaves 51 points for how does that pasta cook make everyone else on the team feel? Do they bring out the best in everybody else? And so when we talk about 51 percenters, we're talking about something we've learned, which is that there's an emotional skill set that I can't stand when I hear people describe it as soft skills. They're hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would have it. But there's 6 emotional skills that we have found are always at a very high level in someone who's a 51%er or someone who we say has a high HQ, a high hospitality quotient. And these are people who actually are happier themselves when they deliver good stuff to other people. It's not everyone in the world. And I've got friends, I've got colleagues, some, not many, who are not primarily motivated by how they make other people feel. But I will tell you that the most successful colleagues we have, in addition to the 49 parts technical proficiency, if you're not great at what you do, all bets are off anyway. But if you can, in addition to that, also be amazing at how you make people feel, you're probably going to end up with better teams in the long run. You're going to end up with better working relationships. You're going to end up with better partnerships. And we've come up with another slogan because it's all too easy, especially as you're growing your business, as we've been for several years, and as we came out of the pandemic. It's all too easy in a tough labor environment to actually just hire anybody who can cook and kind of put your blinders on and forget what we've learned about the power of having the emotional skill set, the 51% to go with it. And so we came up with an expression which people now have on their coffee mugs around here, DFS, which means don't settle. And the goal
Something was missing there, Danny.
Well, it's in the coffee mug. So it's all too easy to settle. And when you settle, and you know this better than anybody, not everyone is going to play number 1 on the team. But the real question is, when you settle for someone who we call a whelming performer, they never do anything good enough to win, and they never do anything bad enough to get fired. They're just whelming. And that is the most dangerous thing. That's because we settled. And they set a low bar. And it makes the champions demoralized. And it lets the slackers feel like, well, I guess in spite of everything that they talk about, this must be good enough. And it's not.
This episode of the Wide Open Podcast is sponsored by Maurice Garment Care. Established in 1961, Maurice has set the standard for full-service dry cleaning, home, interior, and wardrobe restoration. Their reputation for wedding gown restoration is second to none. They have pickup and delivery service throughout New York City, Brooklyn, Long Island, including the Hamptons. They also have a shipping service that will send garments throughout the United States. They can be found at www.maurice.newyorkcity. That's Maurice, Meurice, and can be reached at 718-328-0313.
So I live in West Hartford, and that has changed so much in 30 years, and that there are so many restaurants. And I've always been told the restaurant business is a really tough business. And I can tell when I walk down Farmington Avenue, because a restaurant is here one day and it's gone the next day. And the turnover seems to be so incredibly high. And One of the things I've learned as a coach is you can have your best strategy, but you've got to make in-game adjustments. And, as I think it was Muhammad Ali said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the nose. And,
That was Mike Tyson, actually.
Was it Tyson?
Yeah.
And one of the things that, that I've noticed, at least in coaching, is you really have to make adjustments along the way and to be successful, especially in a tumultuous industry like you're in. And, so I was just wondering, coming out of COVID, you guys survived COVID. I think about Uber. How did Uber survive COVID? Uber Eats. They figured out a way to do that. So what kinds of challenges have you faced, and how do you make those in-game adjustments?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. You're constantly, and those adjustments are a lot like sailing, which I'm not very good at sailing, but I did learn as a kid. And we would have these sailing races or regattas, and you're trying to get from here to there more quickly than the other guy. But guess what? The wind has other ideas, and it's not a straight line. And it's really who can make those adjustments more quickly and more effectively that ends up winning the race. And it's not a big difference. And in business, the business environment is changing so quickly. I mean, I can just tell you from what we do, and I think your Uber example is a really good one. We couldn't have people in our restaurants. Legally, we could not have people in our restaurants for 3 months, and we had no revenue. And meanwhile, our landlords were still charging rent. And, we had some really tough adjustments to make. We actually, for an employee-first company, we had the world's worst dilemma, which is we actually had to lay people off in order to save the very company we wanted to be able to hire them back to. Because we would have run out of money. We would have gone out of business. We had, bank covenants that we would not have been able to cover. Lease obligations, insurance obligations, et cetera, et cetera. So we basically had to lay off about 90 to 95% of our staff over the course of 3 months because no one knew when COVID was going to end. So even though I had gotten the advice, do it deep and do it once, we foolishly thought that, the pandemic may be done, in 8 weeks or something like that. And that just kept getting longer and longer, right up to the point that we closed all of our restaurants on March 13th, 2020. As a matter of fact, on March 13th, I drove with my family up to Connecticut because New York was a pretty scary place. And we had our last restaurant meal at the Shake Shack in West Hartford. And it was a weird time. We didn't know if it was safe. Everyone was saying, you're going to die if you get COVID. And in fact, that was happening left and right in New York City back then. No one knew what the medical community didn't know what hit them. So lots and lots of adjustments. Do you have to learn how to have outdoor dining? Do you learn how to do delivery? Do you learn how to have a digital app? Is that a good thing for your business or for your brand? One of the biggest adjustments, which was a really good thing, a lot of people forget this, but going into the pandemic, the 2 years prior to the pandemic, the Me Too movement hit our industry as much as any industry that I'm aware of. And a lot, and also during the pandemic, when George Floyd was murdered, some of the racism that this country came to grips with at last, our industry had faced that for a long time and had been part of that. And so a good friend of mine, came to visit me a few months after the pandemic started, and we were like 12 feet apart in my office. And he said, "You just got the greatest gift ever." And I said, "Really? That's kind of lost on me. I'm not really seeing that." But he said, "You will never again have an opportunity." All of our restaurants were closed. You'll never have an opportunity to take the whole boat out of the water clean all the barnacles off the underside, patch all the holes in the underside, and put your boat back in the water the way it should have been in the first place, or the way now it can be. And the gift he gave me was that we basically said to ourselves, this, if this is not the thing that's going to end the world, the pandemic, then at some point it's going to be over. And we started framing every decision we made based on, okay, who will we have been while it was happening, and who do we want to be when it's done? And we are a much better company today because of all those changing the plays at a very long line of scrimmage. We're a much more diverse team right now than we've ever been. I never, ever would have wanted anyone to think we were a racist company. I'm positive we weren't. And yet, I don't think we fully appreciated what inclusion means and diverse inclusion means the way we now do. And we're a better company because of that. We have better, fuller decision-making, more perspectives at the table. And it turns out that you end up having a better product as a result of that. So a lot of things were much more technologically advanced than we've ever been, because we had to learn how to do that much more quickly during the pandemic. We had to learn how to run our restaurants much more leanly because we couldn't hire people people just left our industry for like the first year and a half. Even after we could reopen, we had to learn all kinds of different ways of doing business. And as a result, I think we've learned to make money better, which means we can hire better people and give more raises and promotions to better people. And it's so if you can get through these storms and you end up in a better spot than if they had never happened in the first place, you don't wish a pandemic on anybody. But you do there. I'm a big believer that there's a lot of macro things that we can all blame: the weather, the economy, stuff we can't do anything about. But what are all the things you can do something about? And we're all dealt that same hand. How are you going to emerge competitively and win?
A very stoic approach.
So I have a question for you. Your daughter, is it Hallie or Haley or?
We have a daughter, Hallie. Yep.
Yeah. So has gotten involved, and I got to tell you, one of our, my family, we really love Daily Provisions, and we love her ice cream, and
her ice cream is Cafe Pana.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the red flag one, which is my favorite out of all of them. But so how is that? How are you guiding? What sort of advice do you give your daughter? Or is she just have it within her and has watched you, grow and, sort of knows how to comport and, think with not having her father be right there every moment, helping her?
Well, first of all, Bruce, I should share that Hallie did not want her parents to invest in her business. I completely understand. She's a great cook, by the way. She went to Yale, and Yale has a cooking competition. There are 12 colleges at Yale College, and each one of the residential colleges has its own cooking competition. And the winner of each one of those goes on to compete in the big competition. It's kind of like Top Chef, but it's among school students. If you win it, which you did, you have to take a year off before you can compete again. She's the only one at Yale who's ever won it twice. And you can't win it more than twice because you got to take a year off. So she is a really good cook. She grew up cooking, and we cook together a lot. She's a better cook than I am. I will tell. I'm a really good cook. She's even better. She did not want our investment. She did not want to live under my shadow. It drives her crazy when people come to Cafe Pana and say, "Oh, your dad has another big success on his hands." And I don't blame her for that. So when it comes to asking advice, if I ever have any culinary advice, she shuts down. She's not the least bit interested in talking to me about that. She has asked me, especially early on, a little bit about leadership and management and what should she do here, what should she do there. Now, that said, last summer, we had a really interesting moment. Our whole family was in Italy for a family vacation. And one night before we were all going to go out for dinner to a trattoria, she called my room in the hotel. She's now married. They have their first daughter, who's our first granddaughter. And she was pregnant last summer. And she said, "Dad, can we meet for a half an hour before dinner?" And I said, "Yeah, but we could do it tomorrow if that's better." And she said, "No, it's something I really want to talk with you about." And she wanted to let me know that she was planning to make a job offer to one of our senior managers at Daily Provisions to come work for her at Cafe Pana. And I had one of these moments as her dad, and I'm going like, is the right thing to do to just encourage this, or is the right thing to do to throw the flag and say, that's not how we do business here? And we had a really good conversation. I've never believed that I have a right to hold anybody back from their career dreams, whether they're with me or with anyone else's business. And I said, you know what? If this is the best thing for you and the best thing for this manager, you should do it. It would be really great if he could give plenty of notice, because we're going through our own leadership issues at Daily Provisions right now. And it all worked out great. He's there. He's happy. He's thriving. Daily Provisions is thriving. But that was a funny way to ask for advice, to poach somebody from my team. But I love her, and she's doing a great job with Cafe Pana, and it's really good ice cream.
It's so important that they find their way and carve their path. My daughter came to Trinity and studied in Rome, and Trinity changed her life. But she lived in West Hartford, and I'm 6 miles away. And her whole freshman year, she struggled, and she seriously considered transferring because there was just too much of me around. But I knew that she turned the corner because I was told that she was at a fraternity party her sophomore year, and someone went up to her and said, "Oh, you're Coach Asiente's daughter." And she looked this big guy in the eye and she said, "Let's be perfectly clear. There's a new Asiente in town." And
That's awesome.
So I knew she was off to the races.
I mean, I wish I had thought about that. That's a great line.
I saw something today and I had to laugh, and I wanted to just ask your opinion on it. There's a new restaurant in New York, and what they're doing is they're bringing in grandmothers to provide food every day from their own personal recipes or whatever. Is that just a gimmick, or is that something you find interesting?
Both. It is a gimmick. There was a restaurant in New York in the 1990s called Le Madri. It was an Italian restaurant, and they brought in Italian mothers and grandmothers from Italy, for 2 or 3 months at a time. It was a gimmick, kind of didn't work that well, but our daughter Hallie, who I was just telling you about, turns out she's a real entrepreneur at heart. When she was at Yale, she and another student started a company called UMI, UMI, UMI Home Kitchen. And this was before all of us were, using delivery apps. It was right like a year or two before that. And she wanted to be for cooking what Airbnb is to lodging, which is to have home cooked meals, many of whom were by grandmothers, delivered to you. And, the thinking being that everyone in the world has, a family recipe that's the best version. Could be lasagna or pot roast or, jerk chicken, depends on what the family is, where they're from, et cetera. And it was a pretty cool idea to have a gig economy around cooking. She was either too soon, or because it was really before a lot of the delivery stuff. And it was tough because my wife and I were obviously very interested in supporting it. My wife, Audrey, loves salmon, so she'd get the cook who made the world's best salmon, and I get the cook that made the world's best barbecue. Came from two different households, two different delivery, usually within a half of an hour of each other. And that's not how we want to eat at home. We don't want to eat within half an hour. So there were some things to work out. But anyway, to your question, I think it's people look, here's the cool thing about my business is that through thick and thin, people's bodies need to be nourished several times a day. And they're going to figure out how to eat. Our job is to figure out how they want to eat, how they want to be served, what they want to eat, to what degree they're looking for nourishment, to what degree they're looking for a hospitality experience, to what degree they're looking for convenience, to what degree they're looking for a place that they can go belong. You don't get that from a food delivery. So it's a fascinating time to be in my business, actually, because they're going to be consuming. The question is how, where, and when.
Wow.
So two things. La Madre was one of our favorite restaurants back in the day. I mean, we stopped going, and all of a sudden it just disappeared. But the segue that I wanted to get into was there's a lot of, and my daughter went to school in Austin, Texas. And I don't know if you're familiar with this restaurant called Loro. It's the owner of Ichiko and Franklin's Barbecue did a collaboration together, and it's called Loro. So
that sounds great.
It's really amazing. So what I was thinking, is that a trend? Because maybe we're running out of things to appeal, and in terms of types of foods people want to have. So,
I think it's pretty cool. I really do. I was just talking about that very idea. I wasn't talking about Loro, but with one of my colleagues this morning about it. He reminded me that it's something I'd come up with as an idea probably 12 years ago. But, if you think about your favorite musical bands, they changed through the years. The Beatles may have always been the Beatles, but even the Beatles, they brought in Billy Preston for one album. They brought in Eric Clapton to do a couple songs with them. If you think about some of the groups of my era, like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, that was actually the first supergroup. Each one of those guys is in the Hall of Fame for work they had done with another group before that. The Hollies, the Byrds, Buffalo Springs.
Love them all.
And I feel like our industry might be at a moment right now where you start to see people, restaurateurs, chefs who have a point of view jamming with another restaurant, another chef. And it's fresh. It's kind of a cool thing to see what happens when you bring in different musicians to play with each other. It's kind of fun. I love Paul Simon historically. Look what happened when Paul Simon said, I'm gonna jam with people from South Africa. You got Graceland, Rhythm of the Saints. Look what happened when he said, I want to go jam with people from New Orleans. And you get, kind of a Zydeco feel to some of his songs. I think that's a neat thing. And I think maybe fun for us to think about doing more of that in our industry.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the collabs, I think, are terrific. And I know that place in Austin that we, went to a few times was just incredible. And when you bring those talents together, something bound to come out.
We've been doing that for years with Shake Shack, because if you think about it, well, first of all, when Shake Shack started to go to other communities, even though I'm from St. Louis and I fancy myself being a reasonably humble person, Shake Shack, in fact, was born in New York. Even though it's all comes from food I grew up with in St. Louis, frozen custard, smash burgers, etc. It is considered to be a New York brand. And a part of New York's brand, when you go around the country, is arrogance, whether we like it or not. And so wherever we go, we want to lead with humility. We want to lead the other way. And part of that is to work with with other local chefs. So when we go to another city, they're happy that we're coming instead of resentful that here comes these New Yorkers telling us how we're supposed to eat. So we always, with Shake Shack, have partnered, and this is globally, not just in the United States, but one of the toughest ones was going to actually Texas. So we went to Texas is famous for loving Whataburger, right? Big chain down there. And we partnered with one of the great barbecue restaurants, Kreitz Market, and we came up with the Lockhart link, where we took their amazing sausage, barbecue sausage, and we put it right on top of a Shack burger. And it's one of the best things you've ever eaten in your life. But let the Texans know we love you. We're not happening to you. We're happening with you. Did the same thing in Los Angeles. Try bringing hamburgers to Los Angeles with In-N-Out Burger and a million other places is like going to the Vatican and trying to teach them how to pray. You just don't do that. So we partnered with 5 different great chefs in the LA area. We'll also partner with a local brewery, or we'll partner with anybody who makes the best chocolate in town. We'll put that in our frozen custard. But you want to go in with your arms wide open and say, we want to be part of you. We got to show our taking an interest in you first.
So, Danny, I've been coaching and teaching for 50 years, and obviously, I spend most of the time with the players. But one of my great joys is teaching physical education. And I had a playful young woman in one of my PE classes who was just hysterical. And every day she would come to the class and there'd be fairy dust and Lucky Charms in the air. So I just wanted to know how your daughter was doing and what is she doing?
Oh, so now, thank you. You're talking about our daughter, Gretchen.
Yes.
Who I just spoke to this morning. Gretchen had a really good experience at Trinity, and thank you for taking an interest in her early on. She needed Trinity College. She's the only one of our 4 who went to Trinity.
Right.
And I was so grateful for that. And she majored in psychology and found her passion. Gretchen is a kid who had a learning difference and never felt smart throughout her time. And I could relate to that because all of her siblings kind of cruised through school. And people who have a learning difference, it's not that they're not smart. They just have a different mechanical way of learning. And nothing made me happier than when she found her passion after Trinity. And she became a nursery school teacher for 3 years at a very, very excellent nursery school here, or preschool. And without even talking to her parents, she applied to and got into a joint program at Columbia in both Masters of Social Work and a joint program with Bank Street in early childhood education. So she's currently a master's candidate. And how amazing. And she just got straight A's. This is a kid who had that same chip on her shoulder.
Yeah.
And she's filling it in her own way with her own passion. And I'm just so proud of her.
Once you find your purpose, anything is possible.
That's so true. And aren't we lucky, those of us who have found that purpose?
Yeah.
I came dangerously close to being a lawyer, and that would have been so far from my purpose.
We don't need more of those.
Well, and you definitely wouldn't have wanted me, but you got to understand. So Trinity's poli-sci program is awesome.
Yeah.
I had some really great professors. I am passionate about following. Ever since I was a kid, we used to call it current events back in the old days. And I love that. I still love that. But someone at some point said, well, if you have a poli-sci degree, you're supposed to be a lawyer. And so I did the thing, or I almost did the thing I was supposed to do, as opposed to the thing I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So before I let you go, Danny, and again, we so appreciate your time, and this has been illuminating for our audience. But what sort of wines do you like? And any recommendations? I'm more of a second growth because, a first growth is just out of my, price range. But do you have any, suggestions for us?
It's going to be tough.
Bordeaux. I love Barolo. I love Cabernet. But
this is going to be a tough
wine.
No, I love wine. I took a wine class. Trinity used to have something called Free University, and students could teach a class, and there was a whole curriculum. Believe it or not, I taught a class in horse race handicapping, but I took a class with Mark Levitt, who's now my business partner. We talked about Mark a little bit earlier, and we took a wine tasting class, and then I was kind of off to the races. Look, during the pandemic, when we were all quarantining up in Connecticut, 7 of us, all 4 of our kids, my wife, Audrey, my future son-in-law, a night without wine only meant we weren't starting with white. We were drinking different wines every night. I'd say that if I were on an island and you said you can only drink one wine the rest of your life, and I would not want to go to that particular island, but it would definitely be Italian. It would be an Italian red, either from Tuscany or Piedmont. So could be Brunello, could be Barolo. I admire first growths, but I don't drink them very often. I think, as a matter of fact, I have some in my cellar, and they've gotten so stupidly expensive that I can't even drink them because it's not. I should just sell them because I don't get enough pleasure to make that worth it. But when I go out to dinner, I'm never interested in the most expensive wine on the list. I like to see how a restaurant plays in the middle and try to find good value. There's, 98% of every bottle of wine is exactly the same. It's water. So we're arguing between a $2 bottle of $2 Chuck and a $2,000 bottle for a first growth Bordeaux. You're talking about 2% of these organoleptic materials that they're just not worth all that difference. So,
wow, that's amazing.
Wine is fun. It's good to share with people you love.
Well, Danny, we want to share this conversation with people we love. You're just another level, and it was a real honor to get to spend this time with you.
Well, I want to. You telling me I'm on another level. That's the highest compliment anyone will ever give me. So thank you, both of you, for welcoming me, and thanks for sharing this with your many listeners.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again, Danny. I mean, and I hadn't even mentioned to you, but Sean Feeney, I was very good friends with his dad, and then we became friendly, and he seems to be almost like an heir apparent to
Sean's having
Danny.
A great time, and he's making an impact in our industry.
And he seems to have it really the right, temperament, and he's just a terrific person. And I don't know if you've been to Feeney Pizza, but it's pretty good. I mean,
where is that, in New Jersey, or is that?
No, he opened in Williamsburg, his first pizzeria. And they have a place now, local in the Hamptons. And I mean, it's just incredible.
Yeah,
he seems to have
I have heard of it. As a matter of fact, Randy Garudi, who's the CEO of Shake Shack, pretty sure his son got a job working there this past summer.
Well, we have to let you go, Danny. I know you have a hard stop, but thank you for your time.
Great to be with both of you. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Wide Open Podcast, a Zoa Soundworks production, hosted by Paul Asiante and Bruce Huberman as themselves. The show is produced and engineered by James Pavelko. Theme song and incidental music created by Zoa Soundworks LLC in collaboration with Marco Guarino. Have a question, suggestion, or just want to say hello? Send us an email through our contact page at zoasoundworks.com. That's ZOASOUNDWORKS. It may be featured in a future episode. You can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe to the Wide Open Podcast. We upload a new episode every month. Look for us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you find your podcasts.